Folks, let's go ahead and get started here. Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Daniel Bernstein. I'm with the Corum Group. We are a boutique investment bank that's focused on selling companies, including game companies. I've got a couple colleagues here as well. We've recently sold Digital Extremes to Leo Entertainment. That was a transaction value of about $120 million. We're very, very active in this space. I know we probably have meetings with a couple of you, or most of you, that are either listening or on the panel here. You know, we're excited to be a part of this industry and continue to be excited to be a part of Casual Connect for many, many years. I personally was in the very first Casual Connect when I ran my startup called Sandlight Games that stopped being a startup because I ran it for 9 years and sold it in 2011. Enjoyed actually the process of selling it, which is, you can call me maybe a masochist or something like that. I don't know why, or maybe my brain is just wired a certain way, that I actually enjoyed the strategic dance of selling and also fundraising so much that I joined an investment bank and have been having a ball ever since. So with that, I will let our panelists introduce themselves. Today's topic is strategic opportunities in the games industry. Our panelists are unfortunately a little sleepy, so I'm going to throw some questions from left field for you just to make sure that we use that instead of coffee to make sure that you guys wake up. So Shanti, let's go ahead and start with you.
Great, looking forward to it, I think. My name is Shanti Bergel. I'm from GREE. I've been in the video game business about 20 years, the last 10 of which have been in free-to-play, and only the last 4 of which are actually in corporate development. I used to be a game developer myself, and I run strategic partnerships, business development, and corporate development for GREE, which is a large Japanese company, if you don't know it. So we're public in Japan and about 10 years old.
Hi, my name is Michael Chang. I work at NCSoft, which is a large public Korean game company. I do investments and acquisitions for the company, what we call corporate development. Previous to this, I did M&A for Electronic Arts.
Hey, Chris Petrovic, similar role to what these guys do at their companies at Zynga, and previous to that, held a similar role at Kabam. So in addition to M&A, business development encompasses a few things: strategic partnerships, our go-to-market strategy for Asia, as well as our licensing endeavors where we license IP for our games, and looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, gentlemen. So let's go ahead and start. When you look at kind of the landscape of opportunities out there available for game developers, what do you think are some of the blue ocean opportunities? Everyone speaks about opportunities in Asia. Mobile obviously is red hot and continues to be very oversaturated. But where do you think are kind of the gems out there where you think game developers should be focusing on now? Go ahead.
Could I just quickly ask something to the audience? So this is my 5th year at Casual Connect. How many of you are like 5 years or more attending this event? Kind of first, second, third year? How many of you are focused on mobile? You're mobile first in terms of what you do. How about PC first? Console? AR, VR? Okay. Now you know where the blue ocean opportunities are.
Well, yes. But is there a reason why AR, VR isn't really necessarily the place where game developers are focusing their efforts?
Absolutely. It's risky. We don't know when and where adoption will happen. Oculus, you know, there have been some issues with shipping. HTC has shipped effectively well, but in terms of number of units and people purchasing games for HTC Vive units, you know, I've seen numbers of 10,000, not hundreds of thousands. It's tough to make a business right now on that. Many of us are betting on Sony VR. You know, Sony is investing in a number of companies and buying and forward buying content, so there will be a lot when they launch, but still remains to be seen what the attach rates are to PlayStation 4. Samsung Gear, anything else on mobile VR? We just don't know.
I would also say that, you know, one prevailing theme that you see is just the basic one of self-preservation. So, you know, when you think about what developers face, they face a finite amount of time and a finite amount of money within which to accomplish their goals. And we saw this last wholesale shift when the market moved en masse from web gaming to mobile. And, you know, there was this feeling from the development community that unless you were at the top of the proverbial food chain, that there wasn't going to be opportunities to break through that ceiling and to get scale and to return your money to your friends, family, investors, and to yourself. So they moved to mobile, and now that mobile has become saturated in record time, they go where the next opportunity is, particularly to get venture funding. I think venture funding also drives, or funding in general drives a lot of this. A lot of the folks, with the exception of maybe our esteemed colleagues that you'll see in a later panel, as well as folks up here, have left the red ocean opportunities because that's not where venture invests, and they are spending money on the blue ocean opportunities. And so developers look at that as a way to preserve their ability to continue to make great content. I would say, just for the folks that raise their hands in mobile, if you're thinking about a place to lean into to stay in your existing category, I wouldn't look so much for new platforms, whatnot, but just look at subscriptions. So subscription is obviously a big commercial idea that's been resurrected by Apple and Google, and I think we're going to see a lot of innovation within our mobile sector around that business model. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to shift into a different category.
Before we get to Shanti's answer to this wonderfully vague question, let me do some more key off of what Michael just did, some audience analytics. How many of you guys are completely self-funded of the developers? Just raise your hand. How many of you guys have angel funding, seed funding, only at this point? And how many of you have VC funding?
So Michael has kind of clearly staked out the hater position on VR, which leaves me in the uncomfortable position of actually defending it, which usually I wouldn't do. But in this case, I'd just like to nuance the kind of space a little bit for everyone. I think in terms of funding, VR and AR are white hot. So I mean, if you're looking to spend other people's money to pursue something that may or may not be a blue ocean, that's where the money is from a venture perspective. So like if you are a young studio without an established business, without your own IP, and looking to do something new and innovative, there's definitely money out there right now that's looking for a home in VR, which is less true in kind of traditional mobile gaming. It's less true in traditional gaming overall. That said, I think one thing that's super interesting in mobile right now is that the last two significant entrants to the top 10 grossing lists have been in categories that most of the larger and kind of traditional companies left for dead. So synchronous multiplayer in the form of Clash Royale was something that I think everybody kind of considered a third rail until they did it well. Similarly with location-based games, clearly like not a hot area until Pokemon Go launched and kind of lit the world on fire with that. Like huge caveats over both of those examples, of course. I mean, clearly, like not everyone has the geolocation database that Niantic has, or the amazing IP behind Pokemon Go. Not everyone is Supercell. That said, like those are categories that were left for dead. So in terms of like blue oceans, like are there still $10 billion opportunities in traditional mobile gaming? Maybe. Can you get like outside funding for those ideas? Probably not. But like if you are super clever and you are willing to dedicate yourself to an idea that like few other people will follow you into, you may be able to find yourself in a blue ocean at the end of it. It is a super hard path to choose. It's much easier to go into VR where the money is there. As Michael has pointed out, and I do agree with him on this, the business model is completely unproven. So like where is the install base? Where is the kind of distribution model that works? With regard to subscription, which Krish brought up, I'm a little bit less bullish on it personally. I see it in combination with IAP as opposed to like a substitution for it. I think there are clever ways that you could possibly maybe de-risk your IAP strategy a little bit by using subscription. But at the end of the day, like personally, I consider subscription to be just another format of IAP.
Now, for all that I said about mobile, we are still investing and acquiring in mobile right now. But as Shanti said, and riffing on that, find the areas that aren't highly competitive. If you're going up against Candy Crush, if you're going up against Machine Zone's games or Supercell's games, that's a tough place to be. They're spending umpteen amounts of money on user acquisition. At this conference, we have folks talking about acquisition, engagement, monetization. We know this ad nauseum now. Find those areas where there's still opportunities for leadership. There's not necessarily a leading racer game, CSR2 being good, but there's still room to grow. Shooters, a wide open area. Areas in console and PC where there have been large markets in gaming subgenres where there isn't that presence and dominance today in mobile. I'd argue that EA Sports, where Shanti and I came from, have started doing even better now than they did in the past on mobile, but there's still room to grow there, and there's still room for opportunity for a new leader.
Excellent. Now, we should rename this panel to You Know Nothing, Jon Snow, because I think it's very difficult to predict trends. It's always been impossible in the gaming industry. Obviously, Pokemon Go happened, and it happened very recently. I think before I had a chance to mail you this, which is why I'm going to hit you with a question that wasn't on that list, which is really, what does that mean for that phenomenon? I mean, we've talked about location-based gaming and AR gaming for years, and there's been literally nothing that happened that is comparable to that, what is Pokemon Go. Folks have talked about the fact that, look, it's the right mix of everything. It's the right IP, the right type of gameplay, and really the right time to actually make this a reality, where before, it couldn't happen. Also, obviously, the captive user base of crazy Pokemon players that have been waiting for this for the last 20 years. But is there an opportunity there for other developers to capitalize on that, and what do you guys think about it?
Yeah, I think that I tend to be in the camp that feels like this was the perfect storm of a great technology meeting a great IP that resulted in a pop culture phenomena, and not necessarily today in the creation of a new genre or category that is going to be able to be exploited by the greater masses of the ecosystem. To your point, Niantic had a game out there for 5 years that did nothing. We've all seen our share of location-based game pitches from startups since 2012, none of which got any traction. And if you just think about the practical realities of the learned behavior of consumers about how they consume mobile gaming and mobile entertainment in general, it is on the go, bite size, really easy, quick, in and out, and going out and actually engaging, oddly enough, in physical activity, which we want people to do, is not something that is a scalable proposition from a business return perspective to be replicated in the same way that Niantic has done it. Now, again, that doesn't stop people. I don't know, you guys have probably gotten your fair share of inbound on AR companies that are trying to build on this through their representatives of being the next thing to acquire. But we have to just be practical about what this is and why it's so popular and what makes it unique, and really kind of be disciplined about whether it's something that is now officially a new category. I would argue Clash Royale created a new category or subgenre from a gameplay perspective. And Niantic, I think, is at least 1 degree removed from that, of being able to be something that is a sustaining, long-lasting, top-performing game in the way that we see the charts today.
I think it's an amazingly encouraging sign for the space, but I think it's important to draw the right lessons from it. So I agree with everything that's been said so far about it being somewhat of a convergence of amazingly unique factors. So Niantic, as Chris has said, has had a game out upon which a lot of the technology for this game is based. More specifically, the geolocations that are in that game are basically almost a proprietary asset of that company. So they may turn it into a platform at some time, at which point, who knows? Maybe there will be opportunities for third-party game developers to access that and turn it into more of a repeatable phenomenon. But that data right now, I think, is a strategic asset of that particular company, in combination with Pokemon, which, from a timing perspective, massive latent demand in that IP and just general Nintendo absence from mobile, I think, has led to massive pent-up demand from fans of the Nintendo universe and that IP in particular. And so it's very hard to imagine like a simple +1 strategy of Pokemon Go, where somebody would come and repeat a lot of the same things that they did correctly, because they're so hard to follow. That said, I think it's really interesting that this is the first mass phenomenon that I can think of that is introducing AR to people in a way that is almost unnoticeable. I mean, no one, I think, who is a non-technologist would even realize they're playing a quote-unquote AR game. And I think it's a learning experience for us as developers, and it is definitely a behavior training event in the player population. And so what does that mean for AR in mobile and in other platforms? That, I think, is worth keeping your eye on. In terms of, like, how do I follow in the footsteps of Pokemon Go as a location-based game, I would flag that with a lot of caution.
The only thing I'll add to this, I agree with the two gentlemen here, is back in 2010, Shanti and I were at EA. We were pulled onto a Tiger team to find acquisitions in free-to-play. We spent time with a number of location-based game companies, Massive Damage up in Canada, Per Blue in Wisconsin, Booyah here in California. A couple of them had moderate financial success. A couple of them were utter financial failures. We kind of wrote off that space. And yes, Pokemon has come up and shown us something new. I look at what Glue has done. Glue had a game that was a functioning casual game. They applied Kim Kardashian onto it, and it went from a $20, $30 million title to something far bigger. What this does point out as an opportunity is you can look at things that are okay and perhaps failures, and if you can apply the right convergence of different factors and licenses and things like that, perhaps you can take something that's just okay and make something much larger of it. So it points out that failure or something that's just kind of a B+ or a C+ outcome can turn into something more if you're smart enough to have a vision for how to change this and make it an A+ opportunity.
So it really kind of goes back, and again, another question that's not on the list, so you're welcome. It goes back to licensing and branding. You know, the Glue is a perfect example where the Kim Kardashian brand completely transformed that entire product strategy altogether. And you know, I think there's very little thought that's you know, usually developers don't think about licensing and bringing in IP to drive possibly greater adoption, greater sales, and greater opportunities for them. Where do you think that's kind of changing in the market?
I mean, I think it's only going to continue to be more important. I think where the change is happening is that developers and brand owners are thinking about integrations in new and interesting ways that perhaps we hadn't thought of before. If you take inspiration from the box product days, it really was just limited to licensing an IP, having that be the brand for the game, and then moving forward with the game. Here we have that in mobile. Obviously, I did a lot of those deals and opportunities at Kabam. Same thing here at Zynga, and we've seen some success with those games in the charts. EA's demonstrated success on the sports side and with Star Wars. But you also have to realize that if you look at the rest of the top grossing charts, many of them are original IP franchises that have not needed to necessarily use an IP to push the game forward, but for the fact that they're now using celebrities as IP, right? So whether it's Kate Upton or Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, on the Machine Zone side, you know, Glue is doing, their thesis is around social media density of a celebrity to be able to drive installs. And then you also have existing franchises like, you know, Michael referred to our recently launched game CSR2. That's a franchise in and of itself, but it licenses intellectual property from the cars that are part of the game, but it's not front and center in terms of the branding for the game. So there are unique and different ways to do it, and I think that brand owners, as games continues to drive its dominance as an interactive medium, are continually looking for ways to use and leverage games as a way to connect with consumers. And that's where, to Michael's point, there's a lot of innovation that you as entrepreneurs can bring to the table with the brand owners on how to create that engagement and connection through working with that license.
Let's see. So speaking for GREE, I mean, we as a company have not traditionally done too many licenses. We've explored a lot of licenses and chosen not to pursue them in favor of doing original development. I think original development, as we all know, you know, is super risky, and so licenses are a way to de-risk your investment in a lot of ways, particularly on the marketing side in a very competitive mobile marketing environment that we all experience if you're in mobile. But you know, one of the things that I think we've taken a lot of heart in terms of our conversations with people who are on the IP licensing side over the years is that the understanding of the free-to-play business model and what the need set is of, you know, the developer community has gone way up. And so when we speak to people who are the owners of large universes, individual celebrities, I think games like Marvel Contest of Champions, Kim Kardashian have done us all a huge service in that a lot of people on that side of the table now understand that the win is in making a long-lived game, is in making a game that I can work as an IP holder with a developer for a long period of time. And that's a really fundamental change from, you know, like the old way of thinking about licensing, which was more, you know, I call it the Blagojevich school of, you know, I got this thing and it's golden and I'm going to like license it off to the highest bidder. And more, I think there's a healthy dynamic in that licensing relationship where people on the licensing outside are looking at very long-term relationships that they want to build with developers and publishers. And I think that is a reflection of the free-to-play business model being greater, more accepted, more nuanced understanding of it around the ecosystem. And that is a super healthy dynamic that has got us thinking as a company a lot more aggressively about partners that might make long-term sense for franchises that we build. And so while we traditionally have, again, not been in the business of making games that are around a specific tentpole event or an IP that has kind of a flashpoint in the market space, we're very interested in working with license holders with which we can build a 5 to 10-year business. And that support is definitely there on the licensing side now, and it didn't used to be.
So when people talk about licenses, most of the times you think about movies, you think about TV shows, you think about popular brands. Can I ask the audience here, if you had to guess on the top 50 grossing on the charts right now, how many of the top 50 utilize a licensed brand in a significant way? Anyone name, how many, is it 10 of 50, 20 of 50, 50 of 50?
It depends, by the way, on how you define it. Do you find
Sure.
a celebrity spokesperson as a brand? Do you
So celebrity spokesperson or applying
social casino brand integration?
Oz onto Zynga slots. How many people think it's 20% of the games are in the top 50 have licenses? 50%.
Don't be shy.
50%? 75%? If I go down the list, I actually can't name that many. Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, Simpsons Tapped Out, Zynga slots using either Oz or the Jessica Parker TV series. Machine Zones used Arnold Schwarzenegger and Mariah Carey and others to good effect.
EA Sports.
Yep, EA Sports.
All the
FIFA and
slots
Madden.
games. All the slots games, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not 100%. So it is a tool. It is a tool to help you grow. It is a tool to help with discovery and acquisition, but it's not an end-all be-all condition. There are reasons why it works. There are reasons why it doesn't work. I worked at EA that did believe in licenses. NCSoft does original IP. Two different philosophies. Both can work if you think about how to do things correctly.
Although another way to look at it too is if you chart the dates or the tenure of the games in the top grossing charts and when they first reached that top grossing status and persisted, the Machine Zones of the world, now you can kind of put them in the licensing camp because of the celebrity integration. Supercell, can you argue that they are a franchise and a brand in and of themselves at this point, or is Clash a brand? Maybe, it's perhaps emergent. But most of the new entrants, whether on the social casino side, whether on the sports side, whether on the RPG side, like Star Wars, whether or Marvel, whether on the car racing side, more recently there has been, if you chart the last 5 years, I'd say in the last 2 years, the disproportional amount of new entrants that have sustained have been on the backs of licenses of some kind, which is just reflecting the reality of what the costs are to enter and sustain. Because at the end of the day, like it or not, we are in a market that has saturated itself in terms of new customers coming into the ecosystem.
Still growing, but hyper-competitive.
Still growing hyper-competitive, but not growing at the same hockey stick that we saw. So I would argue that the mobile industry since 2000 and when the advent of the App Store, 2008, 2009, in 7 years, has a lot of the same characteristics that we saw in the console space that took them 25 years to reach this level of kind of demarcation between the haves and the have-nots, so to speak. And so that's just a sign to me that there are saturation points, but there's also room to innovate in new markets, new business models, and adjacent platforms if you're bold enough. But licenses ultimately are here to stay. Just do some simple math, right? Contest of Champions got 30 million installs in a couple months. And if you just multiply that time the effective CPI of acquiring a customer in the mid-core space, call it $5. No company has, very few companies, I should say, have $150 million to spend in a 3-month period to acquire users, and the cost of that license was infinitesimally smaller than that CPI cost. So, the economics are there, the licenses are there, the execution is what's key.
If I could just say one last thing about that. Just to call it out, everyone probably knows this, but just to kind of put it on everyone's mind, the reason that a lot of people don't do licensing deals is, of course, like access to the licenses that matter. and then also the margin structure of all of that. So like a lot of the folks who are in the business of evaluating licenses have to prove to themselves that they're going to be better off with the license than without, and the reason that you come away thinking that you might not is that the structure of the deal that you are presented with has too high either an upfront that you can't earn back, or the revenue share is untenable, and it basically forces the business case of the eventual licensed product into the red, or just not in a believable way. And so I think it's worth remembering the space in which we play when evaluating one of these things, and that it's a hits-based business. If you have a marble contest of champions, yes, you can make that business case work. I think we don't hear about a lot of the failed licensing cases, and there are many, because there's not a panel dedicated to failed licensing examples. Unfortunately, I think that would be a really interesting panel, Sasha. But anyway, my point being, of course, that the financial structure evaluation is what drives a lot of things. We're in a power law business. There's only a few licenses that actually are reliably able to drive the economics that most developers need to hit their success case. And a lot of those licenses are taken, or they're taken in ways that only leave fragmented pieces that you, the developer, who don't have all the characteristics that IP holder is looking for, can pick up. So maybe you can get a premium license, but you can only get it in a very slivered, fragmented way. So you can get a tiny piece of their universe in a very, very specified way that doesn't actually give you a believable business case at the end of it. So I think the flip side of all of this is to be very, very judicious when looking at the business case of evaluating any license.
Or you can go out and build a Laverne and Shirley game and see how that works for you. Okay, guys, thank you very much. That was great commentary. Let's pull up a little bit and say, for example, that or pose a question, hypothetical, that you decided to leave your jobs, your Cushy Corp dev jobs, and you decided to start a. Of course, I'm laughing because I'm right there with you. Start your own game studio. Now, how would you do it? What would you focus on, and how you would get your funding? And as a corollary to that question is, no effing way you're going to do that, and why that would be the case.
I would love to leave and found something new, actually. So I did 12 years of venture capital and private equity before coming to gaming. If I could, I'll recite what is the holy trinity for what I was taught at 3 different firms about what to invest in an early stage. Management, market, and technology. I'll go into each of these. Management, a great team. A team that can adjust to changing market dynamics, a team that can, a great team, a smart team, a facile team, highly strategic, but also executionally perfect. Market, a leader in a small but rapidly growing market, so that when larger competitors understand the market and know this important area and go in, they will still be able to defend their leadership position. And then lastly, technology. And technology perhaps isn't the right word for it, but it's some differentiation, some unfair competitive barrier to entry, some reason to prevent anyone else from coming in, whether it be technology, whether it be distribution channels, whether it be licenses, whether it be IP, something. Think about that holy trinity in terms of what you're looking for a new opportunity. Think about, fast forward to 3, 4, 5 years from now, what we're going to be looking to buy, and try and start that today. It's a little bit too late to start a new free-to-play mobile game studio unless you're very specific, raising a significant amount of money, being very smart about where you're going. There is opportunity in other areas. We do not know when market adoption will happen in AR, VR in a significant way, but that is one opportunity. Frankly, another one that most people don't realize, console. Things are going great with PlayStation and Xbox. A lot of people are still doing premium. There are some new titles in free-to-play. There's still some room to grow. It's a narrow window, but there is still opportunity in free-to-play console. I argue there's still space in free-to-play PC as well. So that's kind of what I look for in terms of criteria for where I'd like to start a business.
Yeah, so I agree with Michael's framework in terms of kind of zipping to the end, like, what space. Yeah, I think there's still, well, let's back up. You left us no room to not be in the games business, first of all. So there's that. So if I were to leave my cushy corp dev job, as you put it, like, would I even stay in the games business? I think that would be question one. But assuming I'm still in the games business, I think there is room left in PC. I think AR is super interesting. VR, I think there's lots of funding there, although I think we may be starting to get to the middle or the middle end of that funding cycle. But like the other spaces that I think are potentially applicable to gaming and don't get nearly as much play. So there's a lot of activity in kind of generalized AI right now, chatbots, like how do you leverage the massive distribution ecosystem in mobile messengers? I think there's not enough attention paid to like that as a potential distribution space for mobile games or even kind of native games in chat. That said, like all of this comes with a lot of risk. Would I risk my personal career on that? I will reserve that answer.
Yeah, I mean, other than pursuing my lifelong dream of being a professional gamer, that would probably be the only thing I would have any confidence in, since I'm not an intelligent game maker. But the framework that has been talked about here is absolutely spot on, and don't have much more to add on that.
I'll just say one thing. To yourselves be true. If you joined this business during the frothy times of Facebook or mobile because you thought there was going to be easy dollars here, find something else. If you're really passionate about this, if this is your heart and soul, this is the right place to be, and stick with it.
I think, until to that last comment, I have to absolutely say that is very much the thing that you have to follow. I followed and built Sandlot Games through the bitter end. The bitter end was actually I sold the business, so it wasn't so bitter. But the point is, there were a couple times during that evolution that were bitter, that were very difficult. And I think you have to look at it as a long opportunity, as a long view of building a business, not just going out there and capitalizing on whatever's hot. We talk about VR, and I think Eric's one to coin the term "seeing God." You put those goggles on, and you're transformed into an experience that you've never had before, and you can't believe that the world isn't adopting it at a faster rate. But if you're really passionate about that space, if you're really focused on it, think about it, what it's going to be 3 to 4 to 5 years from now, and plan for it accordingly. Raise enough capital, or stock up on enough for ramen to make sure that is a reality for you. So, pulling out a little bit on threats, and kind of we talked about kind of where you would focus on if you were starting out. But if you were looking at the market right now, what are some of the threats from inside? I guess inside the games industry as well as outside the games industry. And I know I posed the question to you guys about what the regulation that's happening in China. I think we're still trying to figure out exactly what that means for everyone. The previous speaker talked about it a little bit. Again, very vague. Not sure exactly what it means. But what do you guys think are the threats out there right now for game developers as these folks are trying to build their businesses?
Well, one of the threats we see, this is on the marketing front, is that non-gaming companies are continually spending more of their energy and budgets in deploying marketing dollars within the mobile ecosystem. We've had enough of our own challenges competing between and among each other for user acquisition and share of voice and eyeballs. And now we've got Fortune 500, Fortune 250, Fortune 1000 brands continually experimenting more and devoting more. They've moved past kind of allocating analog budget to digital budget. Now, within the digital budget, they've kind of moved away from online and are going into mobile as all of the technologies around attribution and tracking and distribution of ad creative get better. I think that's only going to continue to drive up competition for what is ultimately a finite amount of inventory that marketers worldwide want to buy at any given point on any given device in any given geography. So that concerns me a little bit from just kind of an external threat. And I'll leave it to these guys, then we can circle back on internal.
So I'll talk about two things. So one is, I would say, one distribution point and one product point. So the distribution point is, I think that, actually let's start with the product point because it affects the distribution point. The product point is that, franchises have always mattered in entertainment. I think we see that more and more these days in mobile, because mobile has kind of matured and the usual kind of dynamics have basically enforced themselves in mobile. But as you see people licensing IP, as you see people having bigger and bigger investments to create original IP as you see marketing costs going up, and the advantage of having your own original IP, particularly original IP that makes specific use of graphics capabilities that advantages you on places like Twitch and in video advertising, which are mediums that are very important right now, allows you to reach out to streamers and establish communities around your games, and allows you to establish franchises that are longer lived. I think the importance of franchises has basically made its weight felt in emergent, what had here before called emergent markets like mobile. And so I think it's hard to overstate the importance of those assets in any digital ecosystem. And the digital ecosystems are looking a lot more like each other. So if you look at the digital distribution, this is the distribution point on PC through Steam and other kind of digitally enabled distribution vehicles. You look at that on console with the basically App Store-like experiences that are going on console, and the kind of more open but still natively 100% pure digital download ecosystems that are available on the open web. It's starting to look a lot more like the App Store distribution that everybody knows in mobile. And so the thought process behind how do I create a long-lived, durable digital franchise speaks to both of those things. And so the ecosystem that you as a developer or you as a franchise holder are going into is starting to unify in a way. So like distribution is starting to look a lot more convenient versus what it used to look like in places like PC and console that mirrors what we who have been in digital know from our time in mobile, from our time in social, from our time in the open web.
I'm a diehard capitalist, and I'm going to make a socialist type of a commentary here. And it's somewhat related to what's happening in the world we live in today. I'm afraid that the threat to gaming is that there's going to be a greater disparity between the haves and have-nots. Because it's so competitive right now in mobile, because there's not that much movement in the top grossing charts, I think there's going to be less outlet for creatives to go out there and create their own, the games that they're passionate about, brand new studios to be successful financially. I would like everyone to be successful and have a successful experience in gaming. I think unfortunately we're going to see more and more people have failure. And unless they join a larger company or have join a company with resources that are inordinate to dominate the market, there's going to be a little bit of disenfranchisement. Now, it's events like this that hopefully make people more positive about what can happen, broad and open discussion, kind of sharing of information to figure out how we can all be successful. But in kind of a bit of a socialist way, I'd like to see there be kind of more success and more opportunities for everyone versus kind of a disparity between the haves and have-nots.
And to circle back and riff on what these guys were saying and couch it in the context of an internal threat, we heard the last speaker. I asked her a question about the regulations happening in China. I'm not as concerned about that making its way into Western markets, but it is an interesting proxy for what is ultimately the reality of the business, which is if you take the regulations that China's dusting off and trying to resuscitate, what they're basically telling you as both a domestic developer within the borders of China as well as a foreign developer looking to get a game in China is that you have to funnel your product through veritably a hand-picked number of companies that are going to be your conduits into that market. So you remember back in the beginnings of smartphone and app development, we all we're hailing the demise of the publisher, the middleman. This is all going to be direct to consumer. From those of us that remember the feature phone days, it was that ecosystem of a conduit that got between you and the ultimate distribution store, and we're seeing that again. We're seeing that in China. We're seeing that here in the West as companies need these the help from larger companies, and Google and Apple are also creating a barrier to getting to that direct to consumer endpoint. I know a lot of technologies are being talked about in terms of how do you use kind of native web to be able to deliver interactive experiences, but without the billing solutions, that becomes tough. You see the recent changes that Apple has made in terms of how they editorialize featuring, which threw the industry into a tailspin earlier this year. But ultimately, as we've talked about for many years, if you're relying your business model on this fingers crossed notion of where you're going to get featured or promoted or advertised by the store, that's a failed strategy. And so that's not one to rely on. But there are these indications, China leading the way, the way that Google and Apple are kind of, continually ebbing and flowing in their control of what can be merchandised and what you can see, that's ultimately done away with this direct-to-consumer utopia vision that we had when app development first came upon us. And so innovation is key. Looking at new market opportunities are key. Pushing the boundaries on new technologies that can unlock direct-to-consumer interaction is key. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to give you the answers about how to get there, but there are levers for us to pull. And while everybody's going in this direction, try and find out what's in the other direction and how you can get there, because you can't deny the penetration rate of mobile devices and the growth that still has to happen. We have, I don't know what the exact number is depending on what reports you read, but we're just past the 50-55% mark in terms of penetration of what you broadly define as smartphones. And so you have a whole other half of the world that presumably will catch up or be at parity at some point in terms of having access to these computers in your pocket and being able to consume interactive content. And so I think there is still some optimism there, but we're clearly in a very, very mature market, and the kingmakers or the storefronts are continually making it more and more challenging.
So as a corollary to that, we talk about kind of riffing off the Game of Thrones idea. Winter is coming. There's going to be such consolidation at the end of the day that not even the consolidators are going to be making money. I don't know if winter is here, or if it is indeed coming, or you believe that the consolidation wave is a wave that is a maturing industry, becoming more mature, and will continue that way. That's an open question.
Yeah, I won't speak for these guys, but for the assumption that they see, that we all see kind of a lot of the same companies and have a lot of the same discussions. I think one of the hypotheses that I came into 2016 with was that from an M&A perspective, we were seeing a lot more opportunities that look like acqui-hires than look like premium competitive acquisitions where price was going to be an issue. You're seeing a lot of great teams unfortunately not being able to sustain or going out to market as game developers, asking for funding to become great marketers. And that's not necessarily the best thesis upon which financial investors are going to give money. And so I think winter is here, if I could just make a broad kind of generalization. But the good news is there are other seasons after that. And this isn't a necessarily stagnant or eternal winter, but I feel like we are in that state today.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the individual space and the individual vertical in the game space that you're talking about. In mobile, yes, clearly winter is here. In social, winter was here, and we've got a different winter now. And so I think it's different by space. And so if you look at things that are less mature than like VR and AR, for example, no winter yet. Will it come? Sure. I mean, these things are cyclical and they follow a predictable set of rules. I think it's worth understanding why consolidation happens. So like every deal that happens usually happens because there's an advantage sought by the buyer and a feeling on the sell side that the risk of continuing to go it alone is not worth the trade-off of taking kind of the bird in the hand. And so as you play that conversation out across multiple conversations that happen between guys like us and developers out in the world, then you have basically the broader direction of any given submarket. And I think the interesting thing is that a lot of those conversations are very specific to the individual circumstances of the company involved. So I have found personally that there is, my team is tired of hearing me say this, but there's no good time to buy a game company, because either the company is adamant that their plan is a rocket ship and they're about to go to the moon, or they have just launched and they either have validation of that or they don't, at which point the conversation shifts completely in the other direction. And so, a lot of those individual kind of micro factors affect the overall macro point. Is it winter? Yeah, I would say it is. Are there companies that are, so hot that they would never consider exiting right now, despite the fact that they're in a red ocean? Absolutely. And those companies are being asked to exit by people like us all the time, and they are saying no. So is that winter? Yeah, it is at a macro sense, but it's not necessarily winter for them.
I actually don't see a wave of consolidation coming that's unusual from any other period of time. I did 4 deals in 3 years when I was at EA. That was a decent pace. I've done 2 so far in a year and a half. I guess what I'd say is the following here. There has to be a reason for us to buy a company. If not, we just won't do anything, right? So there's a ton of companies who they need an exit. We're just not going to provide it for them. There's no price we'll pay. But if you are really good, we will find a way. We will find a way to do something here. But I don't see any unnatural pace of acquisitions or consolidation happening right now. I do see a freeze in mobile game funding at an earlier stage, or a shrinkage. I do see a lot of activity in VR and AR. And again, it's gotten a little bit frothy, so I think it's going to slow down a little bit. And those companies that raise their first rounds of financing are either going to prove what they can do or going to have a very difficult time raising their next. I'm seeing some opportunities in free-to-play console, still some opportunities in free-to-play PC. There will be a steady pace of deals going forward, not frothy, not frozen, but kind of here. Shanti and I looked at, we were on a panel earlier this year. You looked at 200 deals last year. I looked at 180 last year. I did 1, he did 1. We'll try and increase the pace this year. We really are trying to put money out. If you can give us a reason to do so, we'd love to do that. But we'll respond to the opportunities as we see them.
A great conversation, great suggestions for us. We're a Latin America game studio. I would like you to comment into that market. It's growing, is over 150 million smartphones. Is there, and also into a category that is the trivia type casual games. Zynga, Work with Friends, Draw Something I know that have driven a lot of money to the company. Those trivia crack success coming from Latin America in the same space. And even though never got to, I would say, the top 10 grossing, as an investor, you could 10x your investment by many, many times. So what would your opinion in those type of cases in the region and in the category?
So I'll answer this in a broader context, which is, the notion of how North American companies look at international markets that are outside of our core kind of, North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. We've all, I'm presuming, looked at our share of companies in emerging markets. I think, a couple of factors come into play when I think about it, and I think the dialogue is always great so that you, as the entrepreneur on the ground, can educate the broader market about perhaps the realities. But, the thought about emerging markets and Latin America being one of them is that, a very divergent population in terms of socioeconomic, language, and access to technology and infrastructure. And this doesn't just apply here. It can apply to India, it can apply to Southeast Asia, it can apply to the African continent equally. But these are all traits that need to reach a certain tipping point of scale and stability for us in more mature markets to be interested in it. So we talk about infrastructure, socioeconomic, geography, language, bankability, the ability for to extract dollars either passively through advertising or actively through transactions. We know that Latin America has historically been kind of a prepaid model, and a lot of transactions had happened offline through cards and tickets that you then take to your mobile phone. So a lot of friction there compared to what we're used to here in Western markets, which is one click buy, credit card in the cloud, you don't see it, great, and you move on. So, a lot of Western companies get a little bit timid about exploring markets that today don't look like what we're used to, combined with the risk of trying to predict in the crystal ball when that market will reach operations that are in best practices with what we're used to. You can't deny the density of the population. You can't deny that infrastructure is improving, handset quality is improving, connectivity is improving. But ultimately, somebody needs to come out from that market to prove to us that it can not just be a regional success, because you talked about the trivia, and puzzle category, but have the opportunity to be a global success. Because I think at this point, companies at our size have to look at things from an opportunity cost that are global versus just regional. Because when you look at the mix of our revenue coming from a certain region, it's not currently sufficient to justify wholesale attention on just that one region without thinking about how that investment's going to pay off for the broader global opportunity.
I'll just nuance a couple of things that Chris said because I pretty much agree with what he was getting at there. So one is, I think, the larger the company gets, the more global the opportunity evaluation is, and that leaves an opportunity for people who don't think that way. So the more regional you think, the more that you have an opportunity that others might pass by. And so I think that's worth considering. In terms of would an outside investor be interested or an outside publisher, I kind of refer you to Michael's framework. Like in terms of market space, like one of his three legs, I think what's interesting about most, quote unquote, emerging markets right now is that that's where the handset growth is. So if you look at the kind of quote unquote developed markets, we've reached saturation. It's a replacement market. People are buying their fifth and sixth, like iPhone or Android device, whereas people are kind of new to the ecosystem in many cases in a lot of emerging markets, Latin America included, and that means that they are as kind of in line with GDP of those areas. There is an attach rate that is growing, and basically there is a hockey stick going on in those submarkets, which may or may not make for an interesting opportunity, depending on how tightly you define it and how global your competitors are. I think in terms of the trivia market in particular, would an investor invest in a trivia market game? A trivia game market. I think that's a bit of a harder sell for an outside investor, particularly a games company, because we would tend to look at it in terms of historicals, which like if you're looking at the historicals of trivia before Trivia Crack, you would have missed Trivia Crack. But like the pattern up until that point was not one of sustained success, and there was some very unique things about the way that they chose to roll that game out, which I think made it into a more durable franchise and much more of a global franchise. I think a lot of the revenue, you mentioned it didn't get into the top 10, was not seen by the app stores because it was in advertising. So I think the success case that particular title represents is a lot bigger than it gets credit for, and it probably would have been missed by traditional investors like us.
You ask a good question. I focus on North America first, Europe second, Western, then Eastern, Asia third, maybe Asia before Europe. But you know what? I have no lack of confidence in developers in South America and India. There are a ton of developers we know out there, and they're really good. Brazil, Argentina, Chile, India, right? I'll kind of comment on India first. I'm amazed how many Indian developers there are and how small the gaming market size is there from a domestic revenue standpoint. The talent's there. The development talent is absolutely there. We've bought, Playdom-owned studios down in South America. We've all sent stuff out, work for hire or development contracts. There's a great group in Brazil called Aquarius, things like that. The development talent is there. Growing the market is the challenge. Now, I spend a little time with alternative payment providers and payment providers in general, and that's a good way to track, how you get boletos from Brazil or things like that. That just needs to be easier and better. There needs to be a way to extract more dollars out there so that there's more content created for the domestic market. But the development talent is absolutely there.
So, you mentioned that VR and AR is very hard right now, might be even getting frothy. I have two questions. One, like generally I think the feeling is that it's still too early for content. Like there's a lot more money flowing into tools and technology IP versus content. What do you think would be the right time or the right traction for content to be viable, especially like multiplayer games, or think about poker, for example? And the second thing is, if you guys look at virtual reality, what do you think the same like key metrics apply to VR as with mobile, specifically if you look at casual experiences, or they're completely different?
So I'll take it first because GREE actually does have a small VR fund, so we do seed investments in VR content and other VR companies. I'll take your questions in kind of a random order. I think the nature of the metrics that you look at in VR is likely different. And the reason I say that, not because I have the answer, just because if you look at the way that those experiences are consumed and the business that's trying to be built is likely not the same as in mobile. So mobile started in premium and then eventually shifted to freemium as it became mass. And it became possible for developers to get huge install bases on games similar to what they had experienced in social, with completely different reasons why and characteristics of that. But the business drives a lot of the questions that you're asking. So at what point can you build a a poker game, for example, or a casino game of some kind, like that's more of a mass experience. Like can you do a premium version of that or a free-to-play version of that? Those are all questions that need to be explored. The timing, I think, is a bit of a risk decision. So, like, do I want to be early and build up expertise when nobody else is there and have a competitive advantage before everybody else comes in and be first? Do I want to jump in at just the right time and kind of arbitrage the window perfectly? That's a question nobody else can answer for you. But in terms of like the overall adoption of the space and the macro involved, clearly that, from my perspective anyway, not so clearly, but if you look at the research reports and they predict the size of the market, they're literally all over the map. So I saw a chart just yesterday, in fact, showing that 2 major researchers showed it as I think $40 billion market by 2020, and 2 others showed it as about a 20th of that, or less. And so I think there's not a lot of kind of consensus around like what the market's going to do, and whether it will have adoption characteristics that mirror previous kind of devices or platforms. I think what I can say about that is that mobile was unique. I would caution people not to think that VR is going to have an adoption curve like mobile. I think that's unlikely. I think it'll be more like the attach rate of a peripheral on a console or a PC, which if you look at that, I think the best case was the Sony iToy, which was like 15% attach rate to the hardware. Don't quote me on that, something like that. Anyway, if you look at the dynamic driving the hardware, then you can kind of back into, I think, a content strategy. And it very much matters, like what kind of content you're developing and what your attach rate is going to be to the install base. I know a guy who's building with an indie studio a game that I think will actually have a super high attach rate. And he won't let me invest in his company because he's so confident. And I think he's off to a great start, even though the market is super nascent. And he will likely do well because his cost structure is so small. He has a very small team. He's targeting a market that doesn't have to be the size it would have to be for somebody like us to be interested.
I think hindsight is always 20/20 on this, and you don't know the right time until after it's occurred, unfortunately, right? So, if you look at a couple of the indicators, there's what I call the tethered VR experience, which is more of the high def. It goes into your PC, it goes into your PlayStation, and that's Vive, that's Morpheus, and that's Oculus. Those benefit at a macro level from having existing install bases. If you consider the Facebook database and install base of Oculus, although technically they're starting from a user base of 0, in that they don't have a store yet that's fully built out. Steam and Sony have inherent advantages in that they have an install base, but these are going to be treated as peripherals as opposed to replacing on a wholesale basis what their game experiences are. So you have those standard attach rates. You have cost issues with the cost of the peripheral, the cost of the machine that you need to run the peripheral. So that creates a much smaller total addressable market in the near term. And just if you follow peripheral type of metrics on the console space, you're not going to get 100% penetration there. So you have to severely discount that. On the mobile side, if it's not already evident, my feeling is that all of the hardware manufacturers, Samsung, eventually Apple, definitely Google, and the platforms that underlie those devices are going to force you to accept a VR peripheral with the next time you buy a device, right? So it's going to be a forced bundle that in many cases will be subsidized by one of those players that allows them to gain the advantage on penetration. Penetration is only one side of the story. It's usage that's driven by a couple of different things: the quality of the content and the compelling nature of the user experience. And as an extension of that, one issue that often gets overlooked in many of these VR, AR panels, because nobody really wants to address the elephant in the room, is the physical and mental near-term and long-term kind of side effects associated with this new world order that we're living in. But if you're a mobile developer looking at VR and AR, I would hypothesize that the Sonys, the Apples, the Googles of the world are going to reach out to their developer community to support this new extension of their operating system and their devices, much like Apple has done so with Apple TV and Google has tried before with Google TV. They're going to keep going back to the well, and those people who are not afraid to innovate and have the runway to do so can start experimenting off of their base business of what they've built already to try and create a use case for themselves. But I would not especially the number of people I saw that are self-funded here, I would not employ a bet the farm strategy on going on a wholesale basis into AR and VR. Test and invest is kind of what I like. I haven't coined that phrase, but I like to use it until you find that kind of perfect storm, and hopefully you get that timing right. But I don't think there is. We'll be talking 10 years from now, and we'll say I told you so. That was the right time, but I don't think any of us really know. But I would bet on mobile as a near-term opportunity from a market size, just by virtue of what we discussed.
Folks, I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank Michael, Chris, and Shanti. Thanks, gentlemen.